Welcome to this special edition of Desi Australia. Desi Australia is a multimedia platform that caters specifically to the South Asian community living right across New South Wales and Australia. Our objective is to connect and celebrate this highly vibrant community. Desi Australia has been operating since 1997, and today we're here in the Premier of New South Wales office. It's a great privilege to be here with the Premier to extend our ongoing coverage of the social issues as we have for the many years, what the current issues that are being felt by the households of South Asian community, but also obviously the general New South Wales population, issues around cost of living, what the government of New South Wales is doing to address some of these pain points, domestic violence, social housing, and so on and so forth. So Desi Australia has got the unique opportunity to get access to the Premier on a one-on-one basis, and we're here, and we hope you get some insight out of this interview with the Premier as to what he's doing to address some of your lived experience of issues and concerns. Premier, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
I wanted to start the conversation. We're here to talk about the budget and your policy responses contextualized within the budget that you recently released with your Treasurer. But before I go into the various sort of bigger aspects of the budget and your responses in it, can I just start with the fundamentals of, you obviously entered politics 10 years ago or thereabouts. I wanted to just, for our viewers' understand what your vision as the leader of the state is for New South Wales, and what are the sort of goals and objectives that you can tell the viewers about that talk to the recent budget and connect into that vision that you've got for the state over the next 5 years or 10 years of that type of thing. So
yeah, sure. Yeah. So look, I think it's a really good question. It's fundamental to why someone's in politics. It's often not a question that people ask before they enter or put their name on a ballot paper. But realistically, I think we live in the best country in the world. I think New South Wales is the best state in the best country in the world. We have to live up to our potential, however, and that means that political leaders need to ensure that New South Wales is as best as it possibly can be, that we fulfil our economic mandate, that we are growing as an economy. And on an individual level, I need to make sure that through education and opportunities for jobs and employment, that individuals meet their full potential. And I see that as a uniquely Labor strategy, and in particular a really important part of living in a economy and community like New South Wales. That doesn't matter what your parents did for a living, there's no limit to the potential that you can achieve in this state.
No, I appreciate that, and that's in terms of being a common member of the population, that's what we want our leader to be providing for us, set of policies and an environment, whether it's in the field of education or work opportunities or cost of living, help support with that, which we'll touch on, and so that people are empowered financially and socially to be the best that they can be, which is what Australia is all about. New South Wales, obviously being the biggest state, is all about. So thank you for that. And so, just diving a little bit deeper, there's obviously cost of living expenses that have been skyrocketing. I don't have to go through each one of them. It's lived experience at the moment for households of New South Wales, and we tend to represent the South Asian community out of the western suburbs of Sydney. And whether you're talking about mortgage increases that have been, interest rates have been unprecedented over the past 40 years, sort of level of increases that we've had. It's you work 40 minutes away, you're negotiating the toll roads, M7, M4, and various other tunnels. It's a cacophony of beeps. So what are the specific measures in your recent budget to address this unprecedented increases in cost of living?
Look, a few things. Firstly, we've got practical measures like a toll cap that we've implemented so that particularly motorists in Western Sydney or the New South Wales Central Coast don't have to pay just to get to and from work. We've got measures around electricity and particularly in vulnerable communities and businesses. But I'll be honest with you, the single biggest pressure on households and businesses are the dual threat of interest rates and inflation.
Yes.
Both at the same time hitting household and business budgets, like smashing our economy. Disproportionately more in New South Wales than other jurisdictions around the country. So we believe we've got a responsibility not to add to the Reserve Bank's job of lowering interest rates, not just keeping them the same, and heaven forbid increasing them. And that's why we've been responsible with the budget. To the extent that we're looking at long-term reforms, look, I know that the previous government and the opposition hit us hard. They say there should be cost of living measures. One-off payments that are in the budget for 12 months and then disappear just prior to an election, I don't think help the economy or households in the long run. I would much rather fundamentally fix a problem like tolls or privatisation than just cycle money through taxation, then back into your pocket, and then you're in the same situation in 12 months' time. I might get re-elected. But in the end, it's not helping businesses or households.
Look, I know you talked about toll roads not, being sort of subordinate to the bigger issue of interest rates, but I mean, I can just say from personal experience, toll expense is a major one, especially for people living in Western Sydney. They are travelling longer distances, and you'd be surprised to know, maybe you're not surprised, toll expenses on a monthly basis can be over $1,000 for some households. I certainly have got one. So the relief that we've received from 1st of Jan is a great one. And so my question now is sort of moving into your budget and the fiscal sort of positioning of it. In your budget, you mentioned, or the budget papers mentioned, this gross debt is, and you're not unique in that respect. It's happening right across governments. The debt profile continues to rise over the next few years. Whilst we're getting these reliefs through toll and other measures, are they sustainable and in terms of using borrowing to support the households? I guess my question is, would there be a day of reckoning, either cuts to these reliefs or rises in interest or the taxes, I should say? So look, a couple of things. I can't tax people anymore. They're already at their limit. If you're a business and you've got input costs or you're a PAYE taxpayer, you can't squeeze a lemon in any dryer. So that's not an option for us. When it comes to reform, say for example with toll roads, we're working hard and we commissioned Alan Fells to write a report. It's a complex area of public policy, but we think that there's a way through to reduce tolls over the lifetime of that contract. Now that's fairness, geographic fairness for people that live in communities that aren't near public transport. But it's also really important for a productive economy because there's a lot of transport, logistic firms, a lot of small businesses that are getting hammered as a result of tolls who need that fundamental reform. I needed to put the toll cap in place because it's going to take me a while to get that reform. I have to negotiate with Transurban. I have to get my the basis for change in place. I have to make sure experts are in the room. I have to make sure we don't get hosed. The taxpayer doesn't get beaten around the negotiating table. But I can't say to a motorist in St Mary's or Blacktown, oh, just wait, we're getting there. So I had to put the toll cap in place. I'm pursuing reform at the same time. When it comes to general spending, we're not going to be spending, in terms of the increase in the budget, it's very modest, way more modest than the previous government. They had expenses growth of about 5% a year. We're looking at under 2%. So we're really tightening our belt, and we believe we need to as well. Are you working with the Treasurer to balance the budget in the years ahead? Is that sort of...
Yeah, it is, but we're also conscious that that we have to be careful about doing that. If it just falls disproportionately on say, a small business that's struggling to pay their electricity, or a family that's got a few kids that, can't work any more hours in the week. They're already pulling in 40, 50 hours, 60 hours in the office. I can't ask them to do more work, and I can't tax them anymore. So we're going to have to be careful about where we spend money, be prudent about it in the years ahead, and not add to the burden that families and households are already in.
No, that's fair enough. And just staying on Western Sydney for a minute or two, obviously there's been population growth down the northwest corridor and southwest. The infrastructure has been sort of lagging to get there. I know you're putting in tram works, and you opened the new tram line out of Parramatta, I think, recently. There's a new hospital earmarked. I think you're sort of expediting that out in northwest Box Hill area, I think. Is that infrastructure is a big sort of spending area for you in the next?
Yeah, well, I mean, we're putting a lot of money into Western Sydney Health. So new hospital at Riaz Hill with an emergency department, more beds and a rebuild at Fairfield. Same goes for Canterbury. I mean, these are areas and communities that we think have been bypassed for over a decade. It's really basic, fundamental government services that have to be provided, but we're doing that, and that kind of basic infrastructure is crucial if we expect families to join communities and grow and flourish in the years ahead.
100%. Just sticking to families, and there are families that are not as unfortunately functional, and we're heading into the area of domestic violence now. So I read in the papers that there was a fair bit of, and rightly so, fair bit of policy initiative in social housing and investment going in that space. I know for a fact that there are families out of the South Asian community that have got barriers to access issues, whether it's social, cultural, or educational, or language. I'm hoping that there's inclusivity considerations baked into this extra spending into social housing that caters to that community as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, firstly, we've partnered with multicultural community organisations about confronting domestic violence right across the state. We've done a bit. We need to do more because the prevalence of domestic violence is higher in New South Wales than it is in Victoria. And I don't want to see people return to violent, unsafe households. So we've allocated an enormous amount of money, over $5 billion for a social housing build. But that's in recognition of the fact that 2 weeks ago, Sydney was described as the second most expensive city in the world, behind Hong Kong and just in front of Vancouver. So something's got to give here. We can't just expect people to return to a unsafe house. 50% of those houses will be reserved for survivors of domestic violence. And as Sydney and New South Wales is a multicultural community, of course that will be reflected in the people that we offer housing to and a safe haven for in the years ahead.
Now, I really appreciate that initiative, because we know of a number of organisations that would benefit from that initiative, so thank you for that. Just touching on a bit more deeply into the housing supply and the affordability of housing. I mean, you mentioned Sydney being second highest in the world, and it's been there for a number of years, being one of the most unaffordable cities in the world. And in recent times, we've heard from federal Liberal opposition party that immigration has been held up as the reason for driving this unaffordability. I wanted to understand what your position is, because clearly the budget papers also point out to immigration remaining a central policy for population replacement over and above the ageing and the fertility rates that continue to fall. So immigration is here to stay. The numbers may vary from year to year, as I understand. So how do you position housing affordability and supply, knowing that there's going to be ongoing need for housing supply? What is it that you're doing to feed into that supply and facilitate it so that it caters to the ongoing demand and addresses affordability along the way?
Yeah, I mean, that's a big question for a place like Sydney in particular, but even all over New South Wales. So we're pursuing the largest rezoning of housing in the state's history in the shortest period of time.
Right.
Massive changes to zoning, transport-oriented developments, R2, R3 medium density, right across metropolitan Sydney and in the regions as well. That alongside our social housing spend, we think is a transformation when it comes to building future communities. I mean, that, to be honest with you, we need to do that just to keep pace with Sydney's growth.
That's right.
Immigration is obviously a federal government responsibility. Couple of years, last year we had 500,000 people net come into the country, but there was a lag because a lot of it was generalised stop in inbound migration during the COVID years. Federal government's made a decision to take that to 250,000 in a 2-year period, so that's a major reduction.
Yeah.
I can understand the reasons that they've made that decision. That doesn't mean that I can take the foot off the accelerator when it comes to new housing builds, because really, even 250,000, we still need far more housing stock in the pipeline for New South Wales.
Fair enough. Just moving on to the next couple of questions, and we won't hold you long. Thanks for your time. Just around the immigration, and Australia's obviously, this is educational issue and it's more of a federal issue, but sure. I just wanted to take your view on it. There's pressure being put on the immigration sort of system to tighten the approvals of foreign students coming into the local unis. That obviously has a knock-on effect economically for the university sector and the tertiary sector here in New South Wales. How do you position yourself? Do you see an economic effect to the New South Wales economy because of that tightening?
Yeah. Look, our budget papers reflect the changes. We just get the raw numbers from the federal government's projected inbound migration target.
Yep.
But if you turn the wick down, it'll have an impact. It'll have an impact on the higher education sector. Our largest export last year was coal.
Yes.
Our second largest export was higher education.
That's right. Yes.
Immigration for New South Wales is intrinsic and important for our economy. It has to be managed over the long run. It has to be done in conjunction with housing. But I'm not going to turn my back on immigration. I think it's one of the world's great success stories that people can come from around the world, come to this great country, join communities, start families, start businesses, connect us with the rest of the world, and perpetuating that cycle in a responsible way is part of New South Wales's future.
Thanks for that. One last question. It's the topic of the day at the moment with energy policy. Federal opposition leaders starting to position himself on nuclear power generation as a bridge between coal and totally renewables, being wind and solar.
Yeah.
He may take that policy to the next federal election. Now, I just wanted to understand, if he was to put a nuclear power plant in places like Lithgow or in the Hunter Valley, do you have a position there as the head of the state here? And it's not just the Greens issue. There are a lot of other people who have concerns about nuclear being power generation.
Look, the thing about nuclear is it's not ideological for me.
Okay.
But everything I've read about nuclear is that it costs a lot of money and it takes a long time. We don't have a lot of money for our renewable energy transition. As you said, the state budget's already under a lot of pressure. Federal budget's under a lot of pressure. Who are you going to tax to get the money to pay for this nuclear-powered future? Because the federal opposition has said that it'll all be bankrolled and owned by the government. This isn't private sector investment. So I think there's some pretty fundamental questions. I mean, if your economy is dependent on new sources of energy and you're going to transition from coal to something else, you need to explain how it will be done and who will pay for it. The only at-scale nuclear reactor that's been built in the Western world in recent years has been in England, and that was done by a French company, and it was north of $90 billion. So if you're going to build 7 of them, I think he's going to build 7 of them. It's all going to go on the government's balance sheet, owned, built, operated, paid for by government, by taxpayers. That seems like an incredible amount of money to spend. And when Mr. Dutton was asked how much is it going to cost, he said, well, a lot.
Not sure.
Yeah, well, I think you need to do better than that.
Sure.
Particularly if you're going to say we're going to exit renewables, which is largely being funded by private capital that's coming in. The other thing is that we're trying to attract a lot of private capital in renewable energy so that we can manage our transition. Now, I'm not doing that overnight. Like I've kept the Raring open for a few more years. Our coal-fired power generation will extend all the way to 2040 based on the current shut-down timetable.
Right.
But if I'm asking private capital to come in, invest in renewable energy, then the federal government says, oh, but by the way, we're going to put 2 massive nuclear-powered electricity generators in your state, I think you could strand a lot of capital and therefore probably spook some investors right at the time when we need them to put money in. So look, it's pretty practical. My scepticism about it, my opposition to it's really practical. How much is it going to cost? How long is it going to take? Who's going to pay for it? And I haven't heard any answers or good answers to any of those questions.
Sounds like there's a lot of big questions to be asked and answered yet.
Yes.
On these issues. Premier, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
See you.